Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Overkill, Scorched, out April 14th on Nuclear Blast. This album has 10 tracks, 51 minutes in length, and this is the band's 20th full-length studio album. They are an iconic American thrash metal band. Now from the get-go, you're going to be hooked to this album. Actually, if there's a thing this album has, is hooks, great melodies, great riffs, and super catchy choruses. Every song is an earworm, and it all starts with Scorched, the title track, the opening track, that has a killer intro riff that just has you glued to see what comes next. What is this song going to give me? And then obviously, what is this album going to offer me? And it's an album that feels very balanced, very together. There's a sense of togetherness with each and every single song, but there's also nuances that separate them from one another. But these are just nuances. It's not an album that's going to jolt you from track to track, that's going to feel like a compilation. This album feels like every single song has the same goal in mind. And because of that, you're able to connect better with the album and the experience flies by. It's not a repetitive record, it's just a record that has a sense of direction, it has a sense of purpose, and the design of the album enhances that purpose and that direction. As far as the sound is concerned, this album sounds like Overkill. It actually has a little bit of an old school Overkill vibe to it, from the sound to the production. It's a record that, like I said earlier, it has a guitar-centric approach. The guitars dominate the experience of this record. Great solos from start to finish. Great addition in terms of where the solos are integrated into these songs. Multiple solos, longer solo sections. Everything surrounding the solos on this album is about giving the songs what they deserve, giving the songs value, and not self-glorifying as a guitar player trying to just showcase everything that you can do. There are a lot of technical abilities that come across in these solos, but they're coming across because the song deserved it and the song needed. So the overall guitar playing, from the leads to the melodies, it's a riff machine of an album, and the guitars really take center stage in terms of the sound. I felt like everything started with the guitars, or at least they were in the forefront of the experience, and then in the background you have the drums. The drums have oomph, they have substance, but they're not overpowering. They're allowing the guitars to dominate the sound, to dominate the experience, to take that lead, and they're just sitting in behind them, creating a sense of comfort that pushes the guitar sounds even more into the forefront, pushes them even more forward, allowing you to feel the change in tempos a little bit better because of how the drums are integrated in the overall sound picture. In between these two elements, you have the bass, and the bass on this album pops, and it pops a lot. Every single song you're gonna hear it, sometimes more, sometimes less, but you're gonna hear it. The bass felt to me like the perfect connection between where the guitars were going and how much the drums were holding those guitars back. So the bass does a little bit of the in-between work, connecting these two worlds, and because it's coming in between them, it really feels more noticeable. It feels better in the overall sound experience. It gives this record a little bit of an old school approach, even from a production point of view. A lot of times nowadays, specifically with thrash metal albums, either the bass pops so much that it starts to overshadow some of the guitar work, or you can barely hear it. It's very hard to find an album where the bass comes in and goes out, but it always shows up in the exact same spot in between the drums and guitars. And this album has that sort of consistency. You see it going up and down, you see it popping in, popping out, but you're always going to see it in the same exact spot. And that gives that sense of togetherness that this album has. Everything on this record has a very similar purpose. It's just coming at you from different directions. Either be the guitars or the bass, the drums perhaps a little bit more steady, a little bit more grounded from start to finish. But it's a great sounding album. It's an album that is heavy, but not necessarily overpowering. It's an album that has speed, but it doesn't take you away from the intent of the song and the aggression and intensity that the tracks have. It's just an album that's really well put together, that gives you enough of everything so that you can feel the presence of all the elements, but at the same time you can really digest all of them and all the individualities that they bring into the forefront. And there's no bigger individuality on this album than Bobby Blitz's vocals. I don't know how he keeps his voice so fresh. He sounds as good today as he did in the Years of Decay or even their debut album. I mean, this guy hasn't aged, or at least vocally, he hasn't aged a bit. And on this record, it has one of those performances that really feels throwback. The sound has throwback elements, but the vocals also have a lot of throwback elements. Vocally, this album is stronger than its predecessor. Musically, is also stronger than its predecessor. It's an album that has more catchy tunes, it has more catchy tracks, and that doesn't mean it's taking away from the heaviness, that doesn't mean it's taking away from the power, from the aggression, from the intensity. It's still an album that offers all of those elements. It's just constructed in a better way, that once the lyrics hit the tracks, the vocal melodies hit the tracks, and the guitars come in and take center stage, everything just fits perfectly together. And when you have all of these elements fit perfectly together, you have an album that becomes memorable, that has a lot of quality in it, and it doesn't get old. It doesn't matter how many times I listen to this record, there are certain songs that you have to go back and listen to multiple times as you're going through the album. They're just that good. It's a record that has a lot of quality from top to bottom. It doesn't feel top heavy, it just feels really well balanced all the way throughout. Definitely one of their better records in recent years. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Scorched, the opening track. Great opening riff. I mean, not my favorite riff on this album, but very close. I just love the way it starts. It allows you to feel a little bit of melody, a little bit of darkness, just really the opening of the door, the cracking of the door for you to take the first steps into the experience of listening to this album. This song has great sound. The guitars and drums, you could feel them together, creating power, one ahead of the other, and then the bass in between, bridging the two worlds. The first solo section is electrifying. The second solo section, it just explodes. It just has so much energy, it just has so much strength, and to see the song have those internal ebbs and flows, when you don't see those ebbs and flows throughout the entire album, it's what this record is really all about. It's about the journey and the roller coaster ride that exists within the songs, not necessarily from track to track. This is a memorable track all around, from how it starts, from how impactful the solo sections are, the vocal performance, the strength of the song, how it moves. It's just a great track all around. Next we have Twist of the Wick. Now, it builds from an intro. I like that. I like the fact that it builds from an intro. It doesn't come off to the races immediately, but once you get there, it really gets going. The bass pops a lot on this track. It just becomes almost impossible to dismiss how much the bass pops and the impact that it has in the overall sound, and how much freedom it gives to the drums, and how much freedom it gives to the guitars. The chorus slows down things a little bit more. I felt like the verses were more direct, more to the point, and then the chorus doesn't completely pause the track, but it just slows the momentum down. Slowing the momentum down allows the chorus to be more hooky. The way the vocals come across in that same chorus also adds to that hookiness. Adding some layers to it makes them feel bigger, and when you make them feel bigger in a chorus that has this sort of dynamic, that's what makes it memorable. Now, this is definitely a riff-centric song, and I would say that this track has my favorite riff of the entire album. I could listen to the instrumental side of this song on its own. Obviously, when you add vocals, when you add the lyrics, when you add everything else, it just becomes a complete song. But my favorite riff of the album is in Twist of the Wick, without a shadow of a doubt. Scorched has number 2 or 1.5, whatever you want to call it. It's a close, very close second. But because of the impact of the riff in this song and how much it defines the overall track versus Scorched, that's really what makes this one one of my favorites and my favorite riff of the entire album. Now, my favorite chorus of the entire album is in the next song that I'm going to mention, which is Wicked Place. Now, it's a heavier song. It has some slower moments, but it's more of a rock and roll track. It feels like rock and roll turned all the way to 11. While the other tracks feel like more of a thrash metal song, this one has more rock and roll, it has more blues, has more of those elements, and that's why you feel like the tempos are a little bit slower. That's why you feel like the song moves in a more methodic pace. It still has heaviness, it's just coming from a different place, a different starting point. Now, once it gets into the chorus, the vocal performance in the chorus is phenomenal. You allow yourself to feel the guitars and the impact that they have, more so in the verses. Once it gets into that chorus, it's all about the vocals. It's all about how memorable those vocal lines are and how incredibly delivered they come across. And that's what makes this song so catchy. This is a pure earworm. From the sound to the execution to the construction, and then the nail in the coffin, those vocals and those vocal lines in that chorus. Phenomenal track. These two have two of the best elements of the entire album, but it's really hard to pick because this album honestly does not have a single bad song. It's just a great record, simple at times, but you don't need to overcomplicate. This is Overkill at its best. Direct, to the point, aggressive, heavy, driven, guitar focused with great vocals over the top. That is Scorched. Now, let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.